it's difficult enough to share your faith with a stranger. Now I have to save a human being all on my own. No, Jesus did that. Jesus made it available, and now you have made Jesus available to them.
Sure.
Because you have shared Jesus with them.
Yeah.
And you can trust Jesus with them.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Anything But Quiet Time podcast, where Rachelle and Carder, by the way, do you want to celebrate? We just got over 2,000 subscribers.
Oh my gosh.
On our YouTube channel. We
praise God.
just started doing the video element last year. So if you want to watch, if you want to make your way over there, you can text the word quiet to the number 893-893. Or if you do watch and you'd rather listen on the way to somewhere, Apple, Spotify, still text that to 893-893 and you'll get both links.
I have a way to get us more subscribers.
You have a way to get us more subscribers.
I think if you look into that camera, not my camera that I pointed out, but your camera.
Okay.
And you introduce us like Walter Cronkite and make it sound more professional, more people will want to know what we have to say.
You know what? Why don't you go for it?
Hello and welcome to the Anything But Quiet Time podcast.
Okay.
We are Rachelle and... You interrupted it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How are they going to take us seriously?
Let me check. Let me check the numbers. Ooh, we just lost 100.
Okay, so old plan. Let's go back.
Never do Walter Cronkite again.
Ever again.
Yeah.
Okay. So many things are happening. I think at the time of year that we're talking right now, if you have are watching this at a different time of year, this is when people are in their finals for college and high school and all the grades, actually, right? Teachers are already thinking about summer and they're trying to keep focused. In Texas, there's stuff called the STAR testing, which is standardized testing, and trying to figure out where all the schools are. Then there's their graduation, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
And then, not to mention, if you are going into college, you are then made to do applications for scholarships and all this other stuff. And you hopefully been doing all throughout the year, but everything is coming to a head. And then June weddings, that's become a cliche, but those are around the corner. So it's just, everything feels like it's all there. Father's Day, Mother's Day, your son's birthday's coming out.
You're stressing me out.
I'm sorry, but I'm bringing all of that up to say that is why my quiet time has, I've got multiple ideas all over the place. And I'm hoping, instead of stressing you out, that it'll bring you some calm and some peace, as I've been able to find in Jesus through my scattered quiet time. Because I think God, He knows that we're going to have moments like this. And He's handy.
A little bit. A little bit handy.
When I say handy, it's He knows how to make applications work.
Sure.
And so even though you may be having a scatterbrain moment, He is not, and He knows how to tie up your scatterbrain moments to make a peaceful thing happen in your world. So, God is handy. That's probably the first time I've ever said that. It's not when you're going to see people for a Sunday morning for Easter ever when you write the names of God.
No, it's definitely not a sermon series either.
On a scarf or something.
Right, yes.
Handy.
Yeah. Jehovah Jireh, Wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace.
Jehovah Rapha.
Handy.
Handyman.
No.
The Tim the Tool Man.
Right, yes.
Taylor of the universe.
Well, true. Not the best name.
No. So, all of that to say, I am in the book of Deuteronomy. It's one of those books that you never go to when you are looking for peace.
A lot of rules.
It's mostly about law. There's every once in a while sprinkled throughout a narrative with Moses. And at one point over the last weekend, Caleb was in the house with me, and he's my youngest. He will turn 15 in July. And I'm like, Caleb, I'm gonna come up with something. Do you remember the video that went viral with Shia LaBeouf? And he's
just do it. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't necessarily recommend watching the entire thing because it's just profanity in it. But
okay.
But the principle of what he's saying, I get behind that principle. It's if you're tired of starting over, then stop quitting. Just do it.
Yeah.
So I sent that GIF out to my family, and I was like, Moses trying to get to the Israelite people. Because I don't know how many times, if they obey, then I will cause them to flourish and multiply.
Sure.
And I thought, Caleb, that's it. I'm going back to Exodus, and I'm going to count. And I realized after about 30 minutes of counting, I was in way over my head. I'm going to have to give this a lot more time. Hopefully next week, this time, I will tell you how many times the word obey, if you just obey, comes up.
In Exodus, that's what you were counting?
No, well, from Exodus through Deuteronomy,
Okay.
just through the life of Moses.
Oh, man. Okay.
But
All right.
then I started realizing when I was stumbling over all of these, these very prominently placed, please just obey, please just obey, one right after the other. I also kept stumbling over something else that has occurred to me that you will reread over and over again. I thought, I wonder if anybody's ever done this, and I'm sure they have, but counted how many times God says, I want you to take care of the people who can't really fend for themselves. So in the Bible, we usually read it as the widows, the orphans, the foreigners comes up a lot. Remember how you were foreigners in Egypt. Make sure that when you were going to collect for the harvest, that you're not like eyeballing every bushel. If you grew up in a household like me, then everything was double checked. Like I remember one time I was so proud of myself. I cleaned the dishes in the kitchen. Nobody asked me. And I did it with that look as a child can get, like, yeah, I'm winning. I'm scoring big kid points right now with my parents. And my dad lovingly came up behind me and said, you know what would make this so much nicer? You mean after the free time that I did it without you asking me? And he showed me just, okay, if you take a paper towel and you just wipe the smudges off of the faucet. And so now it looks really shiny. And it's like the icing on the cake that you just gave us. Okay. He grew up in that kind of household. My husband did as well. We're always, if we have a strawberry patch, we could go over every plant and find every usable strawberry, waste not, want not. But when the Israelites were told by God when they go into their harvesting time to not do that, don't get stingy with the strawberry, plants. Make sure that you are leaving plenty behind so that people can come behind and get what you've left them.
Sure.
Because we're going to take care of one another.
Right.
And I mean, we see that over and over again. I thought, I wonder how many times we read that in the Bible. And of course, James, the brother of Jesus, says that to us later in the New Testament. Jesus says over and over again about, he'll make these connections to the Old Testament law. And this is why if you have two coats, give somebody else the other coat. I can't tell you, the older I get, the more difficult I feel. And maybe this isn't for everybody, but I know that the older I get, the more clingy I get to things. And if I have two Star Wars ornaments for my Christmas tree,
you need both.
I need, what if Darth Vader's helmet breaks? And I need the second one, God forbid, because if I give it away on eBay, it'll cost 300% more than what it did when I originally purchased it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you start reading this in the Bible and you're like, oh my gosh, I've gotten into this habit of clinging to stuff. I've become the Israelite who went out and was told, do not gather more than you need. When it came to the manna, when it came to quail, just get what you need for the day and I'm going to provide. And then on Saturday, twice the amount, don't get more. What happened to the stuff that you got more of? Well, it went bad.
Yeah, sure.
So how can we apply that to today's life? The stuff that I cling on to.
Well, I mean, I'd look at, a country like ours,
right?
We're throwing away food and there are countries that don't have it.
Wow.
So it's kind of in that literal sense, right? But you're right. You're talking about more than just, food for the day or subsistence.
Right.
I mean, the things that I can share, time even, and certainly possessions and everything else. So.
And if I'm not giving it away, then it goes bad. It's kind of like, you need to be more free. And obviously you can take this to the nth degree and become obsessive over it. That's not where we're supposed to go.
Sure.
There's freedom in the spirit of the Lord. But at the same time, it gives us this isn't about me type outlook on our lives that we're always Jesus modeled for us. It's not about you. I'm going to put on the towel and I'm going to wash the feet of the disciples. And we had that podcast not so very long ago where you were bringing up that very act of humility. But the first fruits of the harvest also were meant to release, to hand over, and it wasn't like God needed the first fruits, but it is cool how we even talked about earlier, just moments ago, how God can connect all of the stuff together no matter where you're at. Well, he connected multiple dots at one time. This is the way I always put it. So he would have the Levites, which were this group of people that were called to be set apart from the rest of the tribes, they were the ones who were going to be doing the priestly duties. They were setting up the tabernacle. They were the only ones allowed to touch this kind of stuff, and only certain ones of them could. They were very, very strategic, and everything was very logistical in how they would tear down the tabernacle to move on and so forth. But they were not going to be given land in the promised land. And so we're to give first fruits to God, but when we did that, we're also not only going to learn obedience and reliance on God. I'm going to give what if the first batch is the best batch? What if Darth Vader's helmet falls off? But that food is also, a lot of it's going to the Levites because they need food. Otherwise, how are they going to get their food? And they're serving the community. And so do you see how we're going to take care of one another?
Sure.
And he's creating this community, right? And the first fruit part of that, it stuck out to me because in this moment of my life, you know what, Carter knows what's going on in our world. My husband and I have our first fruits in our son named Samuel. For this child I prayed, it says in 1 Samuel chapter 1. Weirdly enough, the Bible opened to that chapter the morning I went to the doctor, and it was for sure, you're pregnant. And we named him Samuel. Partly because that was naming after my husband, but like this was just such a beautiful thing. And so for this child I prayed is that verse that Hannah prays over Samuel. And he's going into this place of graduation, and now what's next? And these offers have been laid on the table. He's been very blessed. He's worked very hard, especially being on the spectrum and having autism. He knew that he would have to work extra hard to make sure that he's keeping on track with things. Anyway, all of that to say, we have offers on the table from colleges. He's been blessed with scholarship opportunities. And my husband and I have a very good idea about what he should do. But we've said since the beginning, this is your life. This is your decision. And there have been moments, I want to take it back.
Sure.
I don't want him to, well, technically he's not an adult yet. Technically, he's 18 in September. Technically, he's still living under my house.
So technically he has to enroll, but then he wouldn't have to attend. Is that what you're saying as soon as he turns 18?
You know, all these little things that I say. And then as I'm reading over this book, that generally I wouldn't say, hey, if you're having problems, go to Deuteronomy. I would not say that. Read a psalm from David. Grieve with David, you know. And Deuteronomy is reminding me about the first fruits of the harvest. And here's my child. And he's our first. And it's asking me to release him. And to bring him to the temple.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, oh. And we have seen throughout all of this, and it was this beautiful moment. My husband was, he's not one who articulates necessarily what he's feeling as well as I do. Blah, that's me. What do you want to know? He is guarded, and when the time is right, he'll bring something to the table. I've been thinking about this. How long? 12 years. You know, it's like, okay.
Oh, wow.
But he shared with me, you know, I'm dealing with the emotion of our first child becoming an adult. I don't think it's a big deal to mention there's a gentleman in the room right now recording us, helping us make this happen. He has adult children. He's been there, knows what that's all about. Well, this is new terrain for us. And new terrain, what's that look like? Well, a little bit like that piece of your backyard with unmowed grass. And we live in Houston, Texas. And if you don't mow, and we've had a good rainy season, then that's a swamp.
Oh, yeah.
So it's new terrain, and before any of that gets manipulated any which way with a bulldozer or our own ideas, that's new territory that we have to kind of discover on our own with God's help, right? It's how I had to do it when I left my house, when I went to college, when I got married. I'm stepping in faith into this opportunity with God, and is not the same God that is in me and my son. Am I allowing him to stretch his legs in this new territory, or am I trying to go out before it and mow it down first? You know, and we're not to do that. And it's so difficult, especially, and I will say this, and I say especially, I have no other point of reference. So I don't know if it's especially, but he's a special needs child. So there's like, how much of this do I need to try to keep my fingertips on logistically for his own health? But then you wrestle with that, Rachelle, is he a capable person? And Carter, I've had such incredible conversations with my son as of late, and hearing him maturely go through the processing that he is doing prayerfully and logistically. It's given me peace. I'm still having to it's not even every day, it's every moment of the day. It feels like re-release. And hopefully I'll get to a place later in life where it won't be, I have to mentally release.
Yeah, sure.
It'll be a fluent, Lord, you have him.
Well,
you've always had him.
My mom still tells me how to drive. I don't think that will ever go away. Yeah. But you're right, because we know what we should do.
Right.
Of you release and eventually leave and cleave, and he'll be with a woman and get married, and we see it and judge it when we see other people of like, I'm sorry, your parents told you what house to buy?
Yeah.
You're a 30-year-old married person? Wait, why are you gossiping about your spouse to your parents anyway? Like those kinds of things. And we know that's wrong, and we can judge it from the outside. But man, when you're on the inside of it, really in either role, especially if you respect what your parents say and you're trying to balance that, the relationship between your parents and your spouse, like but obviously in this case, if you're the parents and trying to release that, it's hard. It's hard when it's your own situation. It's so easy from a distance to go, that's really not right.
It gives you a new appreciation if you have parents who have successfully, or tried to, at least you can see they are trying to release those things.
Yeah.
My mom will catch herself.
Sure.
And I'll tease her about it, but she'll like ask me a thing that's a little bit hovering because she's my mom and I'm always going to be her baby. And like you said, to your point of driving, like even that still.
Right.
But she catch herself, and that just, it's one of those new stages of life that we always have a season, right? Every season of my child's life, I'm discovering new ways to be enamored by my parents' faithfulness to God, and to try to release their children over to the Lord, in their own heart and in their own mind. Yeah. They don't have any semblance of control. We never did. But we usually have a say, at least. And I say we don't have control. God has given us parental control over certain things, within our house, and this is what we will not do, absolutely. But as far as anything eternal control-wise,
Sure.
we only have them for a set period of time, and I was released even from the pressure when I was listening to a podcast of sorts with Focus on the Family. Was talking about how we have ourselves on this crazy timeline of only 18 years where we're able to save our children before they go on. And they're like, what kind of pressure? It's difficult enough to share your faith with a stranger. Now I have to save a human being on my own. No, Jesus did that. Jesus made it available, and now you have made Jesus available to them. Sure. Because you have shared Jesus with them. Yeah. And you can trust Jesus with them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that reminds me, you talked about the authority. My son's 3. He tried to give me a consequence the other day. You're going to get a consequence. I go, you don't have the clearance for that.
That's right.
You don't have the clearance for that.
Check you that. First of all, that was very cute.
Yes.
Second of all,
however,
snip this in the bud.
I wanted to go back to something that I talked about a couple episodes ago, because as I kind of reviewed it, and I guess full transparency, we'll release a small clip, like a 30-second or minute-long clip to social media from each one of these episodes.
Yes.
And when I watched the clip, I'm like, I don't think that's going to go over well.
You said it weirdly?
Or? More so without the context of the full episode.
Oh, yeah.
But then as I kind of thought about it, I'm like, did I really give this due diligence? Did I say all that I wanted to say?
Before you get into that, I have a cautionary tale for myself, and perhaps this will be helpful for some. Recently, there was a pastor that was brought up to us on our radio program. Okay. And a caller called in, and they were very upset because one of our fellow radio people apparently was sharing about this author who's a Christian. They didn't go into detail about why they thought this person was, the devil. basically.
Okay.
So I Googled, I'm like, what's going on? Is there false teaching or whatever? The only thing I could find was this very shortened clip that had been removed completely from context. And they even stopped him mid-sentence.
Oh, yeah.
This guy's preaching a sermon about how this person is a false teacher. And look, here's proof. No context.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like, wait, we got to be, now I'm not saying that maybe we don't have caution there. We shouldn't have caution with what was spoken. We have no idea where they're lifting this from. I have no idea what it was talking about.
Sure.
I'm preaching a whole sermon about.
Yeah. It goes both ways. Somebody can't show me a clip for a minute of any person, and I go, oh, well, that's a good teacher right there. I mean, I can't.
That's true.
I don't know that way either.
That's a really good point.
But that's to be cautious, right?
If we've ever said anything or if you've seen us in a video clip, thank you for grace.
Yeah,
in
that's true.
regards to what you're about to share.
I wrote some notes because I want to make sure to say this properly. And you might at the end of it go, yeah, you said that the other day.
Yeah, you did it great.
But there's a couple points I want to hit to make sure I'm saying it clearly.
Okay.
I was talking about coincidences.
Yes.
And that I believe in them, and that I think there's thoughts on both sides of, is every little thing in our lives ordained for that moment as a little God wink from God?
Okay.
The front row parking spot at the store, all green lights on the way to work.
Right.
Is that really this epic, predestined, ordained moment that I need to go, well, I bet that was for a reason? I guess I don't feel that way.
Okay.
Now, what I want to say is God is sovereign. God is in control. I said that the other day too. But I think when I didn't explain it well enough, I want to say that because the truth is God works all things together for good, I want to start with the context of Romans 8. And Romans 8 is the fact that it's talking about suffering. So let me just say a couple of lines of this. I'll start at verse 26. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes with the saints according to the will of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for all who are called according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. And so the context here is suffering. So certainly I want to give credit of any time disease is allowed to touch my life. I don't think these things are necessarily in that way by chance. Certainly I know that God knows all of it, but even specifically that certain of these sufferings were allowed to happen so that God will be glorified ultimately. So while the green light traffic thing, I think would still apply after I read that.
Sure.
I also want to say that while God didn't necessarily determine a green light traffic situation, in the same way that he determined a world leader or nation's borders, as it says in Acts 17, I also want to reiterate that God is in charge of it all, and that he does what I didn't say the other day, that he knows every single thing that would happen before it did. Green lights, the number of hairs on our head, the sparrows, as it talks about.
Sure.
God cares about these little moments. I mean, so don't get me wrong. But with free will and the conditions of the physical world that he did determine, there are natural causes and effects.
Yes.
So he determined gravity would be a good idea. Does that mean he predestined every time I would fall? I don't necessarily. He thought, okay, now I'm going to have him fall here and I'm going to have him fall there. It's kind of like, to me, God's working on a carpentry project, which is perfect because Jesus was a carpenter. And as he's working on his plan that he's working all things together for this project, there's sawdust falling to the floor.
Yeah.
I don't think he's necessarily predestining the sawdust.
Okay, yeah.
But it is an effect of God's plan is fully working out in human history. And I'm a part of that, and every little moment in my life is a part of that. And so I guess the main reason I bring this up is because I've heard skeptics say, because one is I want to make sure to go, whoa, that moment could have only been God. But not over spiritualize things like green traffic lights. Maybe one day it does stick out. Right. And I've heard people say, hey, if I didn't get caught by that red light, for example, I would have gotten a wreck. Well, I think that's true, but you also catch inconvenient red lights thousands of times a year, right? And so I don't think every necessarily one of those is a miracle. But I've heard skeptics say, I can't get behind these Christians that say, hey, God's looking out for me. I got the front row spot at the store, when somebody else's kid is going through a journey through cancer. And I've heard skeptics go, why are you sitting here basically they're saying over spiritualized. They may not use words like that, something like that, but your God also does this. And so I just want to be cautious in that way, go, God is in charge. God is sovereign. God knows every single little thing that would happen. God also cares about those moments in our lives that, like, you open up the Bible and there's the word Samuel, the name Samuel, right?
And I'm not the person that generally is going to go, hey, here's a great idea. Just, flip the book and then your finger points at it, and there's your answer for whatever.
Jephthah, apparently we're going with the name Jephthah for our son, right?
Exactly.
You didn't do one of those things.
Don't do that.
So I know there are moments in my life that it's like, wow, this could have only been God, or I really feel God, having an impression on me. I really feel like I'm hearing from him. I just also want to be ready for those hard conversations that God allows it all. And some of these things are cool. I got a green light today. I'll thank him for that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to dig too deep into that if I don't think there's a bigger reason for it. So I guess when I say happenstance or coincidence, all under this physical world God determined.
Sure.
But did all of these little things have a bigger meaning than just God's goodness generally in my life as it is every day? I don't think so.
I think it's his permissive will.
Yeah, that's good. But passive will and active will kind of thing.
I mean?
Yeah.
And so there are differences with all of that, and divine appointments as opposed to a fingerprint of God moment.
Sure.
It's like, there have been those green light moments where I'm like, Lord, I just want to thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Whether or not you actually made that happen, you set into motion people. People who think and create technologies.
Sure.
And sometimes these things line up, and I just want to thank you. And maybe just kind of even tracking it back and saying, you made people who could create this thing. And today I had a green light moment. But Lord, that doesn't take away from any of your power or your sovereignty on a red light day.
Dude, that's true too. And I don't want to also be so curmudgeon. I'm not saying don't thank him for green light moments or front row parking spots. I think we should thank God for every good thing that has happened in my life. I'm just not necessarily going to let those be a part of my testimony.
I think it's good to be cautioned about what parts you share, because people can use it like a magic cantation. Is that the right word? Cantation?
Incantation.
Incantation. Yeah. So there's just, if I say the right words, then it's going to be like that.
True.
This is a magic somehow recipe for getting what I want.
Mantra, and it kind of becomes new age, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if God has used, and I know that there have been moments where there was a highway shut down before we went to go deliver little Samuel. And there was a bad accident on that highway. And, those kinds of things that divine intervention can absolutely take place. And when he allows it to touch our lives, and this is what I consistently say, because there are things in my life that God has allowed to remain that do not feel good.
Sure.
But he promises will be used for his ultimate glory and for good.
Yes.
So how do I explain that to people? If he's allowed it to touch my life, then somehow, some way there is purpose in the middle of it. Yeah. And even discussing the anxiety disorder that I have, that people have come up to me and saying, I really needed to hear I wasn't alone. And if for no other reason.
Yes. And that, I think, is the true context of Romans 8:28, right? The suffering that is allowed so that people don't feel alone, and they know that God is still there and that he's good. And I think that's the context for that.
And I could make an argument against what you're saying as well. I don't know that I want to, because, but for let's say, and I hate devil's advocate, so I'm going to say disagreeer's advocate.
Enemy's advocate, okay, yeah.
But if somebody was like, well, wait a second, if all things work out for good, for God, I mean, because it says all things. It does say some things.
It does say all things, yeah.
And if he is going back to Rachelle's dot-to-dot book, connecting multiple dots, who's to say he didn't give you the green light day, and maybe he's not just trying you on a red light day? I don't think anybody on the planet can say what is in God's head, okay?
Right.
Up his
totally.
sleeve, how he works. I do think we credit not just heaven, but also hell for things that should not receive credit.
Sure, yeah.
And sometimes we can run amok with that.
Right. And I think it's more about I want to trust God in every good thing that he says, and that just like I look at the Bible as the index in the back of the textbook, right? If I do this math problem, I really feel strongly that I got this math problem right, and then I look to the back of the book and the answer is incorrect, I'm the one that's wrong.
Something's wrong here.
I'm the one that's wrong, not the book.
Not the book.
So where we take these liberties of going, God did this or God did that, some of them you're just like, okay, I just got to take your word for it. There's no scripture for or against that, right? And some of it is like, I think we're taking these liberties of going, not even that what you're saying is like wrong or evil, just that we don't see an example of that in scripture kind of thing. And so I think that's where Christian culture can be very just spiritual, feel good sometimes. Presumptuous, yeah. And we're running out of time. I know we got to go.
We got to go.
But we'll more on that maybe next week.
We told them we didn't want to be hurried.
If
we had talked like Walter Cronkite the entire way, it would have been way more paced feeling.
And we would have been here for 3 hours.
That's the way
we just lost another 100. This is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast.
Next time, Paul Harvey.